Yeah, we're live.
Thank you. Friends, welcome to the post-lunch keynote session 2. I hope that all of you could grab your lunch. It was too tight. I understand that some of the breakout sessions got delayed for a couple of minutes, but it's good to have you back in this plenary session. Continuing with the keynote session 1 and various discussions that took place in the breakout sessions. In this session, also, we'll deliberate on 3 key questions. During the pandemic, what we did well and what we fell short on. Why is it important to work together and collaborate to go further? And addressing development challenges and sustainable development goals going forward. So in this session, we have 4 distinguished speakers. Our first speaker is Srimati Vidya Shah, CEO of Edelgi Foundation. Our second speaker will be Shri Anshu Gupta, founder and director of Gunj. Our third speaker will be Shri Nagendranath Sinha, Secretary, Ministry of Rural Development, Government of India, and Shri Binay Acharya, Chairperson, Voluntary Action Network, India, Vani, and the founder director of Unnati. So I will introduce each one of our distinguished speakers as I invite them to speak. So let me start with Srimati Vidya Shah. She is the chairperson and CEO of Edelgi Foundation, the philanthropic initiative of Edelweiss Group. Vidya was an investment banker before she started Edelgi Foundation. Over the last 13 years, Edelgi has been instrumental in supporting more than 150 organizations, scaling up their budget, impact, and reach exponentially. In addition to being a non-executive director at Edelweiss, Vidya also serves on the boards of various prominent non-profit, such as Janagraha Center for Citizenship and Democracy, Center for Social Impact and Philanthropy at Ashoka University, and the Indian School of Public Policy. She also serves on the governing board of the Indian Institute of Management, Udaipur. Vidya, floor is yours. You can take 12 to 13 minutes time as we have discussed, and we'll be utilizing the remaining time for interaction with the audience. Thank you so much, Vidya.
Thank you so much, Kaustav. Thank you for inviting me today. And congratulations to Pradhan for another great Samagam 2020. And it's such a pleasure to be amongst such esteemed speakers. I'll just spend just a few minutes on talking a little bit about Edelgi and its history. And Edelgi was started formally in 2008, but the process of giving at Edelweiss preceded it when I was CFO of the company in between 2000 and 2007. And the giving actually began only because we believed we were very fortunate to be at the right time, right place. And we believed that we needed to show our gratitude for the education our parents had given us and for being born at the time when opportunities in India really began to explode after the reforms process began in the early 90s. The sector was very different. The development sector was very different in 2008. And in all humility, I had very, very little knowledge. I was a person who had more experience in the corporate sector then. And so, my initial days began with limited knowledge, but it was mostly fueled by the conversations that I was having with our grantees, with the organizations on the ground, and what they were telling me from their experience in working with the communities that they served. You must also remember that this was way before CSR, and before the act was in place. So there were very few mentors, there were very few examples that one could learn from. And this was particularly acute because our model was not just grant making. working to build the capacity of the organizations that we funded in a very collaborative and partnership-oriented way, and to help them think about scale and growth and what it took to actually grow and scale. And a lot of that came from my personal experience at Edelweiss. When I joined Edelweiss, we were only 10 people. Today, we're of course 10,000 people. But when we started Edelgive, we were about 2,000 people. So that growth from 10 to 2,000 people, the exponential growth in the business could not have come without looking at strategy, planning, HR, systems, processes, financial sustainability, capital. And these are the very same issues that even the not-for-profit sector actually needs in order to grow and scale. So understanding of that was really the fulcrum of how we wanted to work with the NGOs we funded. Since then, since these 13 years, a lot has changed. I've, of course, become a little wiser. I've learned a lot from the sector. I've experienced a rapid shift within the sector. Most importantly, I think there's been a significant change in the spending pattern of donors, of funders. If you remember, post-independence, a lot of the civil society organizations grew large based on funding from aid organizations, from bilaterals, from multilaterals, who believed very much in project-based funding, application-oriented funding, and that pretty much continued into the 70s and 80s. But it was around that time also that you saw some early seeds of personal and private philanthropy, though it existed in the form of Tata Trusts and other such trusts before, but you really saw some amount of growth in private philanthropy, perhaps in the 80s and the 90s. And then came the CSR Act in 2014, which initially caused such a stir before it's now become a more welcome measure, and there's a little more acceptance by corporates that CSR is important and it needs to be spent. So there's been a change in both the number as well as the quantum and the quality of funding that the sector has received. At the same time, there's been an expansion in the variety of programs, the innovation that you're seeing across the sector. And you're also seeing a huge number of young organizations, younger people going out and setting organizations that are highly community oriented and are geared to solve the issues that they see on the ground. And all of this really excites me. These are the new developments that is very exciting. And it's also significant that the sector keeps evolving. That is not to say that the challenges don't exist, but this evolution, this agility, this adaptability, it shows me, it shows a path of progress, a path of growth. And the other thing about the sector that I really enjoy is a lot of argument, discussion around the things we see, the things we witness, the changes in policy that sometimes come out of nowhere, but also I always tell a lot of my friends in the development sector across the world that we are a chaotic civil society, but we are incredibly vibrant and energetic, and all of us are driven by a common purpose. And that is what really excites me. Of course, COVID has more than ever tested this adaptability. It has made it a very difficult year for all of us. There's been a strain on the economy, there is a strain on growth across all sectors. And particularly the most vulnerable communities have really borne a huge brunt as a result of this pandemic. And the social sector has really had to quickly adapt, quickly evolve, quickly address the issues that they confronted. In fact, I do believe that we really have celebrated our doctors, our health community, our ASHA workers, our nurses, our government workers, our police, but we haven't celebrated the field staff as much. We haven't celebrated a lot of the frontline work that our NGOs did, not only in delivering food, delivering rations, delivering healthcare, but also doing incredible work around the migrants crisis. For funders, of course, it has meant a lot more demand on being flexible, on letting go of control, of allowing for unrestricted funding. And I think for the first time, there is some amount of thinking, there's a greater agitation among some funders about how do we push this agenda among the broader funder community. For NGOs, these adapted programs and these innovative community-based interventions, even in the midst of limited resources, has been something to truly celebrate. So through all of this, what has been constant? Even through all of this change, I think three things have emerged as lessons and constraints. That the one is that the commitment and strengths of our grassroots organizations is just unparalleled. It's unparalleled. The determination of providing support from funders is also now genuine. You have seen incredible outpouring of support, especially from retail givers in the midst of this crisis. But the third most important thing is nothing can be achieved without collaboration, without working together. As far as Aided Give is concerned, we've always propagated, we've always followed a very collaborative model. It truly began in 2015 when we first signed our MOU to change or to at least improve learning outcomes in Maharashtra. Our MOU is with the government of Maharashtra. And while we had thought through a great deal on the structure of the collaboration, its operation, its execution, has been rather challenging. First and foremost, finding like-minded funding partners who will align with us on our mission and understand each other's role has been a challenge which we've thankfully overcome. We are 7 funders today in this collaborative. But importantly, ensuring that the backend is established so that you enable monitoring in a transparent way has also been important. And lastly, the systematic execution of the program through credible implementing partners has been something that we've really focused on. And through the constant support of the government, we've now been able to reach over 1.4 million children in the last 4 years of the program across 6 districts of Maharashtra, to the extent that the MOU has now been extended for another 5 years to take the program all over Maharashtra. So a successful model is when all stakeholders are aligned, including the government. And this has given us the confidence to now actually be part of 4 other collaboratives. So we are currently actively involved in 5 collaboratives. The first one was in education. The second one is the Coalition for Women Empowerment, which is in the gender space. And personally, it's been very special to me because it's enabled me to explore the women's empowerment space and sector in more depth, which I feel is generally ignored. And through this collaboration with 15 grassroots organizations, we've been able to come together to share learnings on practices that promote gender justice, access to entitlements, promote women's entrepreneurship, and other things. So these learnings from these collaboratives we now have leading positions in the Tata Trust-led India Climate Collaborative. We are part of Bridgespan's Pay What It Takes. And then we're especially proud to be part of the Migrants Resilience Collaborative, which is, I think, a first of its kind, led by an NGO, Jan Sahas, but it's a collaborative of both funders, nonprofits, and lots of partners on the ground to support over 10 million migrants. So with each collaborative, we have learned something new, we've adapted, and by meeting with other funders and organizations, we're able to absorb new ways of thinking, building more robust systems, and finding collective solutions. And now through all these learnings, we are about to put together our latest collaborative, which we call the Grow Fund, focused on rebuilding and supporting 100 grassroots organizations over the next 24 months. We feel that grassroots organizations have had it most hard through this pandemic, not just for their programs, but not just for their group, but for their own people. And so we feel that we should use this fund to sustain their growth and help them wade through these times. So in conclusion, Edelgive's mission overall has always been to expand the strategic reach of philanthropy through collaboration. We believe that through collaboration, we will all get there faster I believe we need to institutionalize our learnings better, spread best practices across the sector. So with this, thank you to you all. I'm very happy to take any questions and of course to listen to my fellow speakers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vidya. I really like the expression. We are chaotic, but incredibly vibrant. Um, because of the diversity in our approaches, diversity in our perspective, that makes us unique. I also like the um, three factors that you have mentioned: the commitment of the grassroots CSOs, determination of the philanthropic organizations and other donor communities, and the collaboration, and particularly alignment with various stakeholders. I think those are critical points that you have mentioned in your speech. I would also encourage all the participants to share your comments and questions in the chat box. And after we listen to all the four presentations, we'll have an open discussion, and there we can take all the comments and questions in one go. I'm delighted to invite Anshu Gupta. Sri Anshu Gupta is the founder director of Gunj. Under his leadership, Gunj has taken the alarming growth of urban waste and turned it into a tool to trigger large-scale work on various rural development issues. Sri Gupta has been leading massive disaster relief and rehab work pan-India, turning every disaster into an opportunity to reach resources and attention to the most ignored communities. Listed by the Force magazine as one of the India's most powerful rural entrepreneurs, Sri Gupta and Gunj have received a number of national and international recognitions. In 2015, he received the prestigious Magsaysay Award as a recognition of his creative vision in transforming the culture of giving India. Anshu, it will be a pleasure to hear you. Please take your time.
Thank you, Kaustav. Thank you, Pradhan, for giving this opportunity and creating this forum. And Vidya, for setting up the tone of today's conversation, because I believe for the world it has been a very challenging time. And as I've been saying again and again, that as of now there is nothing like post-COVID. It is all with COVID, and that's what we all really need to understand. Because even if obviously sooner or later the vaccine will come and we will find a treatment for the health part of it. But then there are many other parts of COVID, the way it has affected the world, and especially for sure this country. And as I often say, and I'm repeating myself, to start, Gunj is now more than 2 decades, and although a lot of people know us for clothing or for know us, disaster response work, but we are largely, an institution which is focusing on rural India, and which has been telling everyone that it is the forced migration which is troublesome. Migration by choice is fine, because even I am a migrated person. I migrated by choice way back in 1990 from Dehradun to do my higher studies or whatever. But a large number of people are the victim of the forced migration, because one of the things which we are not taking care is the Indian villages. And we are happy to have food from there. We are happy to have all kind of support system from there. We are still calling agriculture an unskilled profession, and bring them here, make them plumber, call them a skill. This particular pandemic, I would say, as a society, and I'm talking as individuals right now, I would say it's a thappad, it's a tamacha on us. And I'm being very upfront on this, because it has exposed the way we have been operating, and that's the learning part. I'm not going on the good part of it right now. I'll come back to that, because obviously millions of people, hundreds and thousands of civil society organizations, and the large number of ignored people like Anganwadi worker, which Vidya also mentioned, and the PHC's public health center actually worked overnight, day and night, and that's how we are able to do that. But the fact also remains that we certainly have to relook into the way we have been operating. We all need to answer a very simple, basic question that how come these millions of people never trusted any of the system, any of the business or institution or governments or anybody, even the neighborhood, and started walking within few hours despite knowing that there is no way to go where they wanted to go. So I'm actually questioning on that entire fabric, on that entire relationship. Do we still want to continue with the relationship of donor or beneficiary, or we need to talk about the stakeholders as people? Do I realize that I might be calling a farmer a beneficiary because I have given him 10 kg of rice during this pandemic? But the fact also remains that for the last 2 decades, or 5 decades, or 10 decades, whatever time me, my family, or my neighbors and everyone has spent on this earth, we have been a constant beneficiary of the farmer who has been giving us food on a very, very subsidized rate because the farming is the only profession in this country which that way does not have a minimum wages law applicable. So they have been supplying us the subsidized food. And what I really again I'm repeating myself because these are some of the incidents which have happened in the last few months, and it is heard somewhere, is that as someone who is very keen on journalism, who has that journalism ka kida or a camera in hand, I have covered large number of disasters myself where I went, and team is one part, Gunj is one part, but I'm right now talking about the personal journey because I always felt that it is a new learning. Every disaster gives you absolutely new kind of learning, and it also brings you to a particular level. So in that camera, I must have captured hundreds of dead bodies, distress, and as I said, disaster, all kind of wrong things. But I can tell you that this particular disaster certainly has broken somewhere in an individual who has been questioning again and again on this fabric, on the kind of society we are building, on the kind of trust we are building among people. The way we have been ignoring the village India because the fact remains that millions of people didn't trust the city and they wanted to go back to the villages from where they came, and they came in compulsion and they went back in compulsion. So yes, as a group of people, as civil society institutions and a whole lot of other agencies, we all did a good job to make sure that people survive, people don't die of hunger. But it's also the time that we really relook into the strategies, say that with best possible intentions, maybe in the last many decades, somewhere we failed because we didn't value people. We need to come out of the mode of that I want to survive, I want to live, and I want other people to survive. How long can we really live in that particular mode? This I also feel is a golden opportunity for the people who want to solve the problem of this country because a large number of people are back, in their native spaces from where they came, and even if the country really focuses a lot on village India right now, a lot can be solved. I mean, I see it as an opportunity. We as an institution also see it as an opportunity that how do we really create more employment or work with the people and value their existing skills instead of creating skills of the village folks, so that when they migrate, they only migrate by choice. They do not migrate by compulsion. Uh, I think that's one of the major thing on which we are trying to work and we are trying to promote. So in COVID, Kaustav, in the last say about 7 8 months, uh, we reached out to 26 states where we had a network. And as people know that we work on clothing, but what we did in the last 2 decades is also, I would say, laid the pipelines. The way I think the telecom sector has done optical fiber. So I think Goonj has been able to build that network and lay those pipelines of relationships, knowing local people, knowing local connections with the local community-based organizations. I mean, more than 500 institutions with whom we work very extensively in this particular period, and the local dealers and the lalas and the farmers with whom we worked. It has been an absolute learning opportunity for us. one of the things which we realize today is that earlier when we used to work in these hundreds and thousands of villages, we used to see everyone as a villager or largely as a farmer. This particular pandemic gave us a chance to see through them. Now we see large number of people there as musicians, as artisans, as sex workers, as transgenders, based on their professions, based on their compulsions, based on their skills. I think that has really fine-tuned our work in the last few months, which is the way forward, where we will be focusing more, on those things, so that uh, we can create more opportunities for the people, because the fact remains that even today, in 4,000, 5,000 rupees, you can survive in the village, but in 10,000 rupees, in 15,000 rupees, you do not get even space even in the slum. What I'm trying to say today, I'm not getting more into Goonj work and all that, because that's available on Google if people really want to see. I'm just uh, I'm just trying to say that this is a golden opportunity for a whole lot of us to relook into the way we have been working, change our lenses, start valuing the ignored things. So what, to be honest, worked is the public health centers, the government hospitals, the Anganwadi workers, the Air India, the neglected people, the municipality people, because I also went through, a lot of us, in the team and in the family went through the journey of COVID. And we know that how those ignored agencies perform the best. And the biggest possible offices and hospitals were actually, and the fanciest airports were closed and have been closed. So this pandemic has actually taught us to value uh, something which is ignored, which we often ignored in the race of our development. Or so all those 5 years development plan, 10 years plan actually didn't work. What worked is the courage of an average human being who could cook, inside home and then go out and serve. I will stop here, and I will spend more time in Q&A, not going on the story of Goonj and what we're doing, because as I'm saying, it is already available. So if people are keen, people can go up on the Google or Goonj website and find out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anshu. It was fascinating. And the way you put emphasis on redefining and reversing the concept of beneficiary. Who is beneficiary? I think thanks for highlighting those hard-hitting issues of lack of trust in the basic fabric of our society and institutions. I think it's a very critical issue. And the ways you described putting in place an infrastructure of relationship across states, it's really fascinating, and it shows the potential for scaling up of our efforts. Thank you so much for saying that, valuing the things that we have ignored so far. Thank you so much, Anshu. Since we are waiting for Mr. Sinha to join in, may I invite Shri Binay Acharya. Shri Binay Acharya is currently serving as the chairperson of Voluntary Action Network India, Vani. He is also the founder director of Unnati, Organization for Development Education based in Ahmedabad. Shri Acharya has been working as a researcher and public educator to promote social inclusion and democratic local governance. Over more than 3.5 decades, he has been associated with various social movements, networks, and government forums relating to Dalit rights, gender issues, and decentralized governance. His other areas of interest include program and strategic planning, organizational development, and stakeholder participation. Binay bhai, it's your time.
Thank you, Kaustav. And it's a pleasure and privilege to be part of the Samagam being organized by Pradhan, Priya, and CYSD. Happy to be here. And the topic of the keynote is collaboration to attain SDG. And Kaustav has already mentioned that we need to talk about what we did well in last 9 months, and where you did collaboration to attend SDG. But here I am representing Vani, which is a national platform for voluntary organizations. And I will be talking about the perception battle we are fighting, and how any voluntary sector has done and doing reflection and my practice in last 9 months. Collaboration is fundamental to the development work. No single agency, as Vidyaji and Ansuji has already mentioned, uh, can really deliver change. Our the CSO collaboration is the first and foremost to the community. They are not beneficiaries, as Ansuji has mentioned. We are here to promote, strengthen, and build collectives of empowered voices to assert rights and entitlements. CSOs have long back moved out from welfare, charity oriented activity to more of a participatory, empowerment, accountability, governance oriented activity. The present generation of CSOs, I will say, what Vidyaji has already mentioned, is perhaps the most sophisticated and impactful group of agencies. The recent times, CSOs have enabled people also to navigate electronic portals and websites to rectify or verify their entitlements. We have done many contributions, but despite such contributions, whether it was sector of improving education, improving healthcare, child rights, women's rights, just 25th of November, we celebrated the elimination of violence against women, and many other sectors, livelihood sectors. We are still a misunderstood sector. There are a lot of misinformations. CSOs are continuously asked to testify and prove their credentials. And today we are fighting a perception battle from the general public. There is no need to mention about the legal and statutory provisions that we have to face. The general narrative what we are facing today is highly demonizing. But I am sure the kind of work CSOs have been doing will navigate these bumpy rides. This is just a transition for me. We shall never think that we are losing out. The situation and environment make us feel that we're losing out. But I am proud that we are star players and we continue to make relevant contributions. It is important for us to stop bleeding. In fact, many times we make self-inflicted bleeding. We need to deal our crises and pain points. Let me mention about the crisis. The crisis is we are not able to communicate. We are doing a lot of good work, but we are not able to effectively communicate about our contributions. In Vani, we have been discussing it, that how we can communicate to the large number of masses about our contributions. In fact, early this month, I had a meeting with our past chairs of Vani, Dr. Rajesh Tandon, Mr. Jagdanand, Mr. Mathucharian, Mr. Jayant Kumar, who have made multiple rounds of chairs in Vani. And I would like to share their wisdom with you. They said that we need to work with, we need to collaborate with three sets of people. The first set of people is interlocutors. In fact, that we have not done very effectively. The media and academia, who can reproduce a narrative based on systematic research and then talk about it. We need to also reach out to philanthropists, not big philanthropists, but also even small town business people. They create narratives. And then official policy-making institutions. It has to be no single institution, whether it's Vani, Pradhan, Priya, or CYSD, we cannot alone create a new narrative. It has to be led by thematic champions. It's a series of thematic champions: health, livelihood, women, children, tribal, Dalit, environment. We need these people to take a lead and make stories available at the regional level, write and communicate in vernacular language. In fact, I remember when Sanjay Ghosh used to write Village Voice in Indian Express, he used to tell me that who reads Indian Express in villages? If we need to create a narrative about ourselves, we need to reach out to vernacular media. And I'm sure by systematic engagement with the universities and students, perhaps we can do it more effectively. We need to basically revive our credibility in the sector by communicating effectively. Another thing which we have not done systematically is distancing ourselves from wrong practices. Recently, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment did an evaluation by some students of PISS and some IIT students. They found out that large number of grant-in-aid institutions are involved in malpractices. We knew it before. In fact, it's known widely what is happening to the grant-in-aid. But as a sector, we remain silent for a longer time. In fact, there's a new coalition called RCRC. Many of you might be knowing about it. One of our colleagues, Mr. Libby Johnson from Gram Vikas, just 2 days back, he wrote saying that we need to subject ourselves to comprehensive evaluation about our social impact, about our financial practices, management systems, governance mechanisms, methodology, and our policy interventions. Just having a certification about our work is not enough. We need to subject to repeated verification, because why other people should ask about the verification? The verification must come from within. Another third important aspect is we are mixed up with large number of other institutions who don't work with us. In fact, long back when Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister, perhaps he was the only Prime Minister who held a national consultation in voluntary sector. He that time stated that there is some disturbance, Kaustav. Yeah, that time he very clearly stated that we need to create a voluntary sector policy. In fact, if we do not make ourselves distinct from other institutions like religious institutions or institutions primarily running schools and colleges and hospitals or government promoted NGOs, we cannot make our contributions clear, because we will be always mixed up with others. That's why perhaps it is required to develop our distinctive identity. And look at the amount of work voluntary sector has done, but despite that, we are being demonized. I would like to draw the attention from Champaran movement, which Gandhiji did in 1917. In fact, Gandhiji only went to Champaran after repeated request of Rajkumar Shukla, and then with some volunteers, he collected 4,000 affidavits and testimonials. He reached out to the farmers, but also never failed to reach out to the planters who were exploitative in nature. Babu Rajendra Prasad, in his writing, said that advent of Gandhi has a peculiar sense of freedom and fearlessness made among the farmers. And Professor Mudra Mukherjee writes, the Gandhijis understood the people at the grassroots because of his extraordinary field work, and he put in the, and look, he made every day. The testimonies are so powerful that the then Lieutenant Governor Bihar and Odisha finally forced to meet Gandhiji, and the Champaran Act in 1918. In a democracy, the CSOs need to collaborate with the government. However, we need to derive our legitimacy from the community. That is my key point. We need to derive our legitimacy from the community. The kind of hard work which Gandhiji did with the community, we need to do it that way. Our present must create a sense of hope among the people, as it was happened in Champaran. We shall not derive our legitimacy from the government. This is not our Swadharma. We need to work with the government, but derive our legitimacy from the close association with people. Many institutions, not only Unnati I work with, but many institutions have worked very closely with the government. But government finally accepted those institutions by virtue of their good work at the grassroots. So our grassroots work must speak for itself. Our community, our best defenders. And the government CSO collaboration, many years back, Dr. Rajesh Tandon wrote, is source of life and kiss of death. We should not turn that into kiss of death at all. It should be always a source of life. If we derive our legitimacy from our kind of community level work, from our transformative work, from our innovations, government will accept us. Government is a regulative authority. We shall not be afraid of it. If we are clear with our purpose, if we are accountable, why we should be afraid of the government? In fact, the collaboration with the government must happen in equal footing. And that collaboration will happen by virtue of our good work at the grassroots level. Even our research work, we should not be afraid what government is thinking about our research work. If our research work is empowering the community, it's creating critical consciousness, then our research is meaningful and relevant. Last 9 months, coming back to what is happening in last 9 months, as both Ansu and Vidyaji as mentioned, last 9 months we have done incredible work as CSOs. We worked very closely with migrants, providing them food, shelter, even travel support, and also build awareness on COVID. Government has accepted this. But I must tell you, in last 9 months, our voice is feeble. It is not the voice of the CSOs, but the voice of the community is also not visible. I am particularly concerned that we have done very well with regard to addressing COVID. Our government has made COVID care centers, ICUs, ventilators, made enough PPEs and testing available, which was not available at all earlier. In the middle of May, if you remember, Dr. David Nabaru, WHO Special Envoy, stated that India has done very well so far, but we need to develop decentralized micro-level action for response to COVID. But we continue to work on the areas of upholding 144, curfew, which are more public actions. Those are not public health actions. We need to transform that. In fact, the Kerala and Odisha government has done quite a lot on this. But what is required is COVID is going to stay for a longer time. It's a public health emergency. And until and unless we make public participation in the COVID control, if the entire COVID control is not community owned, by just having police action and fining for using masks, we cannot control it. In fact, entire process must be given back to the community to manage. It has to be community managed. And perhaps as NGOs, as CSOs, we have been silent about it. How to make decentralized plan, how to create a public participation in addressing COVID need to be worked out. And our voice must be louder, and we must communicate with government very clearly. It is mostly our health departments, which we are proud of. Vidyaji has already mentioned about it. We are proud of, but many more things need to be done. As a CSO, that is our strength, and we need to work further. My second area of concern is we worked very well for migrant workers, but that is not the end of it. After the migrations are over, people gone back to the villages, a lot of research, dialogues, debates, seminars are happening. even a lot of draft policies are formed. I myself was involved with Priya and other institutions to make draft policies. But we are not coming out any clear action. I think what is required is we need to work with our concerned state governments and central government to make a very clear policy and action plan to provide welfare and security, social protection to the migrant workers. Because without that, migrant workers will lose faith on us, and they will rebuild the economy. Nobody else can do it. So that's the work needs to be done. And toward the end, I must say that what Vidyaji also mentioned, we need to have faith on small grassroots, homegrown CSOs, because they understand the grassroots dynamics much better than any others. They know how to make public programs reach the last mile. They know how to make schools run effectively. They know how the social protection schemes can reach to everybody. But today, they are deprived of both domestic as well as foreign funds. As from Bani's side, I would like to say that none of our action, the CSOs, we have bigger players, we have smaller players, but none of our action should undermine or and disempower the small grassroots groups. Because without that, our reach cannot be effective to the mass of deprived people in this vast country. And lastly, we should not be afraid of engaging with anybody. In fact, our communication must be with government, with corporates, with philanthropists, with universities, with media, and only if I use the word listed NGOs, the top NGOs cannot do it alone. It has to be done in collaboration with vast other groups of NGOs. And as I started saying at the beginning, if we do a good collaborative work, not project implementing agencies, our work will be transformational. We are change makers, we are nation builders. So collaboration must be systematically promoted, not by ad hoc. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Binay Bhai. Very informative as well as strategic. You have made many strategic suggestions. Improving the communications with the interlocutors, media and academia, philanthropic institutions, both big and small, and policymaking institutions. I also like the idea, the way you have defined how we derive legitimacy. We must derive legitimacy from our community-based work, our immersion with the community, our relationship with the community. So thank you so much for reminding us about all those critical points. Now we have our fourth speaker, Shri Nagendranath Sinha. Shri Sinha is currently serving as the Secretary at Ministry of Rural Development, Government of India. He joined the Indian Administrative Service in 1987 after graduating in electrical engineering from IIT Kanpur. He has held many responsibilities both at the central government and the state governments of Jharkhand and Bihar. His previous assignments include Secretary Border Management, Ministry of Home Affairs, Chairman, National Highway Authority of India, Managing Director, National Highways and Infrastructure Development Corporation Limited, Additional Chief Secretary, Rural Development, Government of Jharkhand, besides Secretary and Principal Secretary in Departments of Information and Technology, Road Construction, Industry, Mines, among others. It's an honor and delight, Mr. Sinha, to have you with us. This is your time, and you can take about 15 minutes to share your perspective with us. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Chair, and regret my not being able to attend the session as per the scheduled time. I have come to Gujarat and was making reviews with the government of Gujarat, and it took longer than expected, and therefore I'm slightly delayed.
Sorry to disturb you. If you could show your full face, your
Okay.
full face. That's perfect. If you could speak. Yeah. Thank you.
Are you able to hear me properly?
We can hear you,
Okay.
and you are visible. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
So I'm grateful to the Samagam conveners for giving me an opportunity of sharing my thoughts. And wonderful set of panelists, and the ideas which have been made are quite relevant, quite appropriate, and very work that is being done for the people of India. So certainly an honor to be on the panel. So I would take 2-3 important issues which to my mind are quite important, which in fact engineer the idea of the collaboration. The first issue that I would like to take up is the issue of undernutrition among the people of India. I was reading an article in the Mint few days ago. I think it came out on 22nd November, written by a gentleman called Sayantan Behra. And it mentioned some facts which are disturbing, and I think these are known to many of the panelists and people in general who are present in the Samagam. This is about the nutritional imbalance that the people of India are facing. So, as per the report there, if you see this proportion of cereals that should be there and as an ideal, so it should be 32%, whereas the actual is about 58%. And if you take among the poorer people, so it's about 70% of the calories cereals. If you take vegetable and fruit, it should be 10%. It is only about 6%. If you take animal protein or pulses, it should be 29%. It's only about 6%. If you take fat, it should be around 18%, and it's only about 9%. The prices of the pulses and proteins are rising. Generally, they have seen about 18 to 30% rise in past few months. In fact, the rise in itself is a conundrum which I have not been able to understand myself. On the one hand, the economy is shown to be great distress. On the other hand, the prices of the produce of the kind that I just mentioned are rising. So I'm unable to understand, but in these difficult times, the situation has become even more difficult for many people. But this is a situation which has arisen in the distress for the urban people. This is a common phenomena for the rural people. And I think part of the reason is also the fact that most parts of the country, particularly those which are undulating in nature, are monocrop. Their cropping intensity is rather low. How do we go ahead for improving the cropping intensity so that people are able to also raise crops which give them proteins and fats into their diet is an important issue that needs to be solved. It cannot be solved merely by supplementation through supplementary nutrition programs, for example, midday meals or the ICDS kind of program. They can serve some targeted segment, but the family in general to have adequate nutrition of protein, of fats, you need to increase the production of these commodities. And here I feel there is a great necessity and great need and great opportunity for all the partners from government, from Panchayati Raj institution, from CSOs, NGOs, community organizations, all to pull together in order to make sure that the production and consumption of these nutritive items increase. And without this kind of a collaboration, which will be multi-sectoral in nature, which will address the issue of equity, which will issue the address of production, intra-household distribution, the issue of nutrition cannot and will not be solved, and therefore the new generations that will be coming will not rise to their fullest potential. So I think this is an area which, to my mind, commends itself to very vigorous collaboration, and the Department of Rural Development team, in fact, we are encouraging the self-help groups as well as through Mahatma Gandhi the issue of cropping intensity, and that is why the issue of watershed development being vigorously promoted. Might be aware that we are doing watershed-based planning for at least about 4 gram panchayats per block, but this is a task which needs to go much further. In fact, if we are not able to do the watershed-based planning for the entire hilly and undulating part of the country, we are not putting it on a firmer footing. My understanding and my belief and conviction is that until unless we are able to do it for the entire such parts, the production of the cropping intensity will not rise, and therefore the production of the pulses and oil seeds will be low, and therefore the level of nutrition, at least in the rural parts, will be poorer, and which will have impact on the cognitive and physical ability of the people of India. So this is an area, this is an opportunity which commends itself and provides opportunity for people and multi-sectoral collaboration of the government, of the CSOs, of the corporates, all to work together in order to work for the improving the nutrition of the country of India. The other area which has been bothering me quite a lot is the issue of the livelihood for our women folk. In fact, you would be aware that the National Rural Livelihood Mission is a very large program, and currently it has enrolled about 7 crore people, 7 crore women. However, if we see the livelihood profile that it has been able to attach, it's only about a crore of people through one form of livelihood, one type of livelihood or more. But the task before the program and for the community as a whole, for the nation as a whole, is very large, and its reflection in the workforce participation by womankind is there for all to see. That is why we find our women are not participating into the workforce that should be counted. I mean, obviously they are doing housework and that should be counted, but if you see income giving kind of a work, their participation remains limited, and therefore we have to work greatly. So that it presents us with opportunity and occasion for working with the working partnership with all sorts of partners. Why I am saying so? Because we made an assessment of how much further we can go from our own sources. So the maximum that we have been able to come up with the kind of resources that are there and that can be foreseen is about 50 lakh to about 70 lakhs. However, the numbers that we have to aim at is about 7 crores. So there is a gap of 6 crore at the moment. Very large gap. We are working with different ministries, and I'm sure that would help. But until a large part of large collaborations and partnerships are built with the uh, CSOs, with the corporates, with the NGOs, with the PRIs, the issue of more livelihood opportunities for our women folk in the rural areas would not be solved. Therefore, the need for and the occasion for partnership. The third vantage point from which I would be trying to address is the issue of the value that our people, particularly the rural people, are able to cap in the value chain. So I would be providing some numbers. There was a study done by the NIRD PR in about 10 years ago, and it did survey. One is Ramadra in Bangalore, and another was Ratnagiri in Maharashtra, and it found that the fruit value chain, the farmers were only able to get about 30 to 35% of the total value. So the share of the producer in the value chain is low, and until unless we are able to increase this share of the rural people in the value chain, rural producer in the value chain, the terms of the trade, the terms of engagement of the rural sector vis-a-vis the non-rural sector would always be adverse, and therefore we have to work out models in which the terms could be more favorable, or could be more balanced, could be more measured and tilted in favor of the rural producers. That's a task which again calls for wide-ranging collaborations with the people. So, I generally divide it in 3 blocks. The first block is of production, in which there are producers. Then the second block is of intermediate processing, so sorting, grading, storing, some primary processing kind of thing, intermediate processing kind of thing. And then you have the final processing and the retail and the market engagement. So we understand that the final part would of course be the domain of the market players, which are much more organized, which have much more staying power. But there is an opportunity for our people if we are able to organize them in form of farmer producer organizations, producer enterprises, or collectives, cooperatives, or organizations of such kind, so that with their collective might they are able to draw resources, do some bit of aggregation, some bit of storage, and then you have the schemes from the government of India in terms of setting up of the farmer producer organizations. You have the agriculture infrastructure fund coming up. So with all these opportunities coming up, we have an opportunity, very right kind of opportunity available to us for working for the rural producer and making the skew somewhat less tilted and biased against the rural producer. And this requires a wide-ranging collaboration with the producer, with the market players, people who are enlightened, people who tap the power of technology to cut out the intermediaries and are thereby retain a greater portion of the value chain in the hand of rural producers. So principally, these are the 3 areas for collaboration which I would like to commend and put before the table for consideration. There are, of course, many more areas which I could mention, but given the lack of time and wide range of opinions which have already been expressed by panelists earlier, I would stop here and again thank the organizers for giving me opportunity for sharing my thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha, for giving us those suggestions with regard to addressing the nutritional challenge, the overall rural prosperity. It was very illuminating. With this, we now can invite questions and comments from our audience. I have already received a number of questions. Those are very interesting and quite intriguing questions. Let me direct those questions to specific speakers. Vidya, we can start with you. There is a question that in a scenario where big donors or foundations are either financing government or getting into direct actions, what should be the role of donors to support non-profit to regain the space they deserve, develop models and prototypes, reach out to the most affected and disenfranchised? Vidya, let's start with your reflection. What can you do and how these philanthropies organizations can behave differently?
I think one of the issues personally at Edelgive, we've sort of had a conversation, discussion, argument about internally is what parts of civil society should philanthropy and the increasing amount of money that's coming into philanthropy, what should it be directed towards? And as we are seeing larger amounts of gifts and money coming into the sector, we're also seeing a tendency, particularly by the large foundations, to self-implement, to set up operating foundations. On the other hand, we also know that if you want to drive work at scale and at system level, you also need to involve the government. So there is always this tension, or let's say this internal discourse that we have about what are the right things to do. And personally, I think as a foundation, what we have found as the best way to go for Edelgive, and it's one of the ways that we're also trying to talk to the broader community, is to work with small and medium-sized NGOs across the country. We like small and medium-sized NGOs largely because they have great connects with community. They're agile. They're able to adapt to changing community needs. They're able to experiment. And if a group of thoughtful funders can actually come together, it is possible to get a lot more cross-learnings among great community programs and help scale those, and some will scale, some will not scale. But the idea is to continue to focus on those who are rooted in communities, who are rooted in the grassroots. And that would be my advice to a lot of foundations who are now either thinking of stepping in or are really reevaluating what they need to do, particularly in the midst of COVID. Because what succeeded in COVID, or to the extent that you can even call it success, is only with organizations who understood what needed to get done and done quickly. It's not people like us sitting in cities and trying to direct the funding. We had to listen to what was coming from the ground and we had to quickly adapt our funding to it.
Thank you, Vidya. There's one question for Anshu. The question is, what is your broad roadmap for creating more opportunities in rural space, as also to soften the consequences of migration?
So I think, as I said earlier, that it is the golden opportunity for us because a large number of people are there, and there are additional skills there. I think one thing which, as a nation, we need to understand that so far rural India has been producing for rural India, for urban India. Rural India does not produce for that way for themselves. So they are making the best possible carpets for us, but not the things which they need on their own. Although when we say 70% population, you also have 70% consumers, customers there. So that entire shift has to happen in terms of the way we are thinking, and let's also value the talent which people already have. Just by bringing them to the city and making them plumber or electrician, it's not the skill which we are adding, but they already. I mean, something which we have been arguing, Kaustubh, for years, that someone who can innovate 100, 200 different varieties of rice, how come that person is not called an innovator? Someone who can add two columns of mango and create a third variety of mango is also an innovator. So we have to value that. And it's not only the farming. It's when we imagine. So I was giving one example in we run this Gunj runs this major initiative called WAPSI, and WAPSI is all about uh, basically creating employment post disaster largely. And we said that, listen, if you say have a cluster of villages, 2 3 villages put together, every village has 100 200 families put together. Those 2 3 villages have at least like 300 cycles, bicycles. 300 cycles means 600 tires, but the nearest puncture shop is say about 5 kilometers away from there. But there's an opportunity to create a puncture repair shop in that area itself. So the whole thing is that how do you really look at the people as customer and consumer there itself? Change our lenses and see through those lenses. I mean, one of the biggest problem in the development area done by whosoever, from the government, NGOs to corporates now, is that we are actually wearing our own distorted lenses in finding out the problem and finding out the solution. We are not going to the grassroots to find the problems and wear their lenses. Then you will only solve that particular problem, which is the heart pressing need for them. Let's understand that we have additional talent in the village. So this is the golden time to fix up tiles in the rural schools, because now you have tile artists or the people who used to fix up tiles in the city, and it looks very cliche example. But when we find out 50 such professions, we also know that there are hundreds of opportunities which can be created locally at a much lower cost, and you can really have much larger impact.
Thank you, Anshu. I'm aware that our session needs to finish by 3:45. It's a pity that I couldn't sort of bring Mr. Sinha and Mr. Acharya again to give some more time for several questions. But what I will do, I will pass on those questions to all of you, and perhaps at some point in time tomorrow you can answer some of these questions. So thank you so much, Anshu, Vidya, Binay Bhai, and Mr. Sinha for joining this session. It was wonderful to listening to you, and also the kind of interest that is generated with the audience. Fascinating. Technology.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
May I request all the participants to stay in this channel for another 5 minutes and next round of parallel sessions. So in the next parallel round, we have 4 parallel sessions, one focusing on education, another focusing on natural resource management, environment and livelihood. The third one is focusing on health and nutrition, and the fourth one is on youth and mental health. The education parallel session will be moderated by Dr. Rukmini Banerjee from Pratham, and organizers are Government of Maharashtra, Seva, Samvedna, UBS, Akashwani, and Pratham. The second parallel session on NRM and livelihoods, focusing on a specific project, Ushar Mukti initiative. Here the moderator will be Shri Vijay Mahajan from Rajiv Gandhi Foundation, and organizers are Government of West Bengal, BRLF, Ford Foundation, WABAC, and 7 other partner CSOs. The third one will be focusing on Chhattisgarh Mega Watershed Project, and the moderator will be Sharon Mohi Kaur from Pradhan. Organizers are Government of Chhattisgarh, BRLF, ABF, Ford Foundation, and 13 other civil society partners. The fourth parallel session is on health and nutrition, and here the moderator is Dr. Vandana Prasad from PHRN, and the organizers are Government of Odisha, Care India, and PHRN. The fifth one will focus on youth and mental health. Moderator is Nikita Rakiani from Priya Youth Program, and organizers are Priya Youth Program, Rural Development Trust, and Youth for Mental Health. Friends, we are not reassembling in this plenary session after this parallel session. So I hope that you will enjoy the discussions in various parallel sessions, and we look forward to welcoming you to tomorrow's deliberation, which will start at 10 a.m. As a plenary session. So with this, we invite you to join the 5 parallel sessions. One of the parallel sessions you can join, and have a good evening and have the rest of the day. Thank you so much for joining this discussion.